Welcome into Outkick the Show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I hope all of you are having fantastic Mondays wherever you may be across this great country. We got a lot to dive into. Let's hit it right off the bat. I'm going to make you a lot smarter with today's Outkick the Show. So let's roll. We're going to talk about Tyreek Hill. We're going to talk about The Athletic. We're going to talk about Dish Network going to war with the Fox RSNs, Cordcutting, Accelerate, and Donald Trump battling Baltimore and everything that surrounds the Baltimore area. But we begin with Tyreek Hill. All right, I want to start right here. Tyreek Hill, for 5 months, has heard everybody accuse him of one of the most vile crimes that exists anywhere in the country and certainly anywhere in the world. That is child abuse. If you had an opportunity to address the fact that you had been accused of child abuse, you would think, first of all, that of all the things the NFL is going to suspend somebody for, if you have previously pled guilty to choking, strangling, and punching your pregnant girlfriend in the stomach, that if you then are investigated for child abuse and it's unclear whether or not you did it, that maybe the NFL would want to send the message of simply avoiding charges for child abuse is not the standard we want to maintain here. We already have a prior issue of discipline surrounding Tyreek Hill. Let's not allow him to avoid complete punishment. But for some reason, because the NFL conduct policy, I believe, is fundamentally broken, they did nothing to him. Sunday afternoon, Tyreek Hill gets to tell his side of the story, and he meets the media for the first time. During his press conference, if you want to call it that, the jugs machine is going off, where you catch the football. The horn ending and rotating practice segments is going off. And he says a ton of times during the course of that interview, you know what I mean. Something along those lines. And he doesn't ever forcefully deny that he committed child abuse. In fact, the only really specific instance he is involved with is addressing the charges. He says that the reason why his 3-year-old said he punches him in the chest is because they put on boxing gloves and he's teaching him how to box. I've had 3 3-year-olds that I have raised. I have a 4-year-old right now. Do you know how many times we put on boxing gloves and I've hit him? 0. Any parent out there who hears this story thinks that it's insane. You lace up boxing gloves and hit your 3-year-old? He admitted to that. This is insane. In conjunction with the audio tape, I have no idea how it's possible that he is not suspended. But on a more important part, if he was 100% innocent, how is this the way he decides to address the media? Wearing a dry-fit Kansas City Chiefs shirt in the middle of practice while standing on the side of the field. He is a very good wide receiver. It is insane to me that Kareem Hunt got double-digit game suspensions for shoving a group of people, one of whom happened to be a woman, and lightly kicking someone in a hallway. Kareem Hunt's going to miss 13 games for that. And for choking and strangling and punching his pregnant fiance, and then being severely investigated and having his fiance on tape saying she lied for him, and him telling you better be afraid of me. For all of that, he's going to miss 0 NFL games. Somebody explain that to me. Somebody explain to me how Ezekiel Elliott can miss 6 games even though we know that his accuser lied and there was an investigation and no charges brought, and instead Tyreek Hill is going to miss 0 games. Also, how about a little bit of testicular fortitude from the Kansas City media? Nobody grilled Tyreek Hill on this story really at all. They were all afraid of alienating their Chiefs fan base. Here's what you need to know about fan bases. They are amoral and they are sociopathic when it comes to helping their team win. Fans don't care what players do if those players or coaches help their teams win. It has always been the case. It will always be the case. But the media that is there working a job should be holding Tyreek Hill to account here. And again, 13 games for Kareem Hunt. I'm not defending what Kareem Hunt did, but 13 games for that and being released by a team. Tyreek Hill gets drafted and is about to get a $100 million deal, even though he pled guilty to strangling and choking and punching his pregnant fiance in the stomach, and now has been investigated for that same kid allegedly child abusing him, causing him to have a broken arm, and has admitted that he puts on boxing gloves and hits his 3-year-old as a way to train him how to be a boxer. I've raised 3 3-year-olds in my household. I have never put on boxing gloves and hit them to the point where they would complain to their mom about me hitting them. And remember, the irony of it all is Tyreek Hill wanted the person who poured part of a beer on him to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. What an idiot. I'm just disappointed in the Chiefs. I'm disappointed in whoever is advising Tyreek Hill. I'm disappointed in Tyreek Hill having an opportunity to talk to the media and looking like such a joke. It was an awful performance by Tyreek Hill. It's a bad look for the NFL that they did nothing to this guy and they punished people far more severely for far less significant actions or alleged actions. This is ridiculous. All right, other big fight we got going on. Donald Trump has gone to war with Baltimore area politicians. This is a fascinating move, and I actually think it ties in with a story I was reading yesterday in the New York Times. New York Times had a story, I believe it was by Cass Sunstein, who is a famous writer and lawyer, and he said he had done his research, and he had found that apologizing always, in his experience, all these different examples, worked against the person who apologized. In other words, we have created an artificial universe where we require politicians to perpetually apologize, and as a result, all it does is weaken their overall audience. If you remember, I never apologized for anything. In my entire 15-year public career, I have never apologized for anything that I've written or anything that I've said. I'm not saying that I'm going to be flawless. I do live radio. I do this show live. I do live TV. You can always make a joke that comes off the wrong way. You can always say something that doesn't, or write something that doesn't come out the way you anticipated it. But my belief has always been that if you apologize to people who are trying to demand apologies, all you do is put more blood in the water for them to come after you, and you alienate the audience that already likes you, which is going to defend you otherwise. That brings me to Donald Trump. Donald Trump seems to have intuitively recognized that apology is mostly bull and that it doesn't actually lead to any kind of successful end of a story. And so right now, I think Trump has actually been pretty astute in the way that he has picked foes. He has moved on from Nancy Pelosi, who nobody really cares about one way or the other. By the way, everybody talks about Donald Trump's approval rating. You know what the approval rating of Congress is? 15%. Donald Trump's approval rating is 3 times as high as the United States Congress. We live in an era where everybody hates everything right now particularly in the world of politics. So if you want to say Donald Trump's approval rating is 44 or 45%, whatever it is, that's 3 times as high as the approval rating for Congress. And so I think Trump has picked strategically the worst parts of the Democratic Party to attack, their most liberal, outlandish, socialist-laden aspects of their policy, and he has gone after them. Whether it's Bernie Sanders, whether it is Elijah Cummings in the city of Baltimore, whether it is Al Sharpton, whether it's the 4 Democratic congresswomen who have been so far left that they're even calling Nancy Pelosi racist. And here is what I think becomes intriguing. Why is every criticism of a minority politician or a minority public figure immediately branded racist in the media today? This is where I think Trump has some fertile soil, because the allegations of racism are so rampant and so abundant and so out of control that every single time he criticizes anybody who is something other than white, he gets accused of being racist. And I think Trump intuitively understands that's good for him. Ultimately, this election is going to come down to a bunch of old white guys in the Midwest, probably. What do they do in Pennsylvania? What do they do in Michigan? What do they do in Minnesota? What do they do in Wisconsin? You tell me who is going to win those 4 states, and I will tell you who is going to be the president of the United States. Everything else is going to pretty much fall in line. Trump's going to win the South. He's going to win the Big 12. He's going to win the ACC Southern states. And I think there is a good chance that he is going to be able to go toe-to-toe down the stretch in the Big Ten and see what ends up happening depending on who the nominee is for the Democrats. But right now, he is trying to brand them, the Democratic Party that is, as incredibly out of touch, as out of the mainstream, and made them now line up to defend the most indefensible parts of their party. Whether you like Al Sharpton or not, he is not the person you want to be going to the wall defending. Whether you like Bernie Sanders or not, his far left-wing socialism is not going to get elected in the United States. Whether you like the healthcare mess that we've got in this country or not, eliminating the existing healthcare system is not a fungible solution. I have said from the get-go, the only politician that I feel very comfortable can beat Donald Trump is Joe Biden, because he's somewhat middle of the road and not reactionary, and he would just take us back to a relatively normal time. I'm not sure what's going to end up happening, but what I would say about Donald Trump in general is there is a civil war brewing inside of the Democratic Party. And you saw the early parts of it when Nancy Pelosi went after AOC. And that war is brewing because there's a belief in the far left wing that what they represent is more real than it is. It's an artificial Twitter funhouse mirror, and I think Trump is playing up that in a big way. So we will see what exactly happens. I will have live reaction immediately after the debates on Tuesday and Wednesday, assuming that they are remotely interesting at all. All right, so live Democratic debate, second Democratic debate taking place on Tuesday and Wednesday. I will be there to give you a reaction. I'm gonna have to block this guy. One of the things that I love about social media is there are a lot of dumb people who think that they're smart. It's the Dunning-Kruger effect. You can agree or disagree with what I say. I am, on every statistical measure, very humble and also very smart. All right? Just the truth. I test well. I always have. Success has followed me everywhere that I go. You can love me or hate me. You can love me and hate me simultaneously. I am insanely smart. All right? Statistically, I am somewhere around the 99.9 percentile. So if you want to argue with the arguments that I make, if I happen to look over, and again, I say that all very humbly. I'm a very humble person, maybe the most humble person that I know. I say that all very humbly for this reason. Whatever argument you want to make against me, I can make it better than you can. Social media is filled with people who want to poke holes in whatever argument is made. And generally speaking, the people who are trying to play devil's advocate are not very smart. What you should do instead is request that I make the counter argument, because I can both make the argument that I believe in and the argument that I disagree with better than you. As someone just said in the comments, very humbly, I would like to admit and say straightforwardly, I'm one of the smartest people on the planet in the world of media. I say that again very humbly, just the truth, all right? So that is my analysis of the latest Trump flare-up surrounding Baltimore and Elijah Cummings and Al Sharpton and everything else. Yes, I am, in fact, a very stable genius. All right, The Athletic has 500,000 subscribers. We've talked a lot about the history and the trajectory of media, and I had a great conversation with Dave Finocchio, who is one of the founders of Bleacher Report. It's going to be up on the new Wins and Losses podcast. Again, Dave Finocchio coming up soon. Bobby Bones also coming up soon. If you haven't gone and listened and subscribed, we had Kirk Herbstreit last week. He's phenomenal. I'd encourage you guys to all check it out. The Athletic has raised $90 million. It's a subscription-based website where you can go read written content for a few dollars a month. And they now have 500,000 subscribers. They say they average $64 of revenue per subscriber, which means that they're making around $32 million. And they now, in my opinion, according to this article from Bloomberg, they still are losing money, but they're confident that they're going to hit 1 million subscribers and actually end up making money at some point down the line. I'm fascinated to see whether or not this works out. I'm also fascinated to think who's going to end up buying them. Because when you raise $90 million of venture capital money like they have, what you're typically trying to do is either turn into a billion-dollar company, which I don't think there's any way they're going to be a billion-dollar company, or you're trying to sell to someone else. So who is going to end up buying The Athletic is, I think, an intriguing question. What exactly is their long-range trajectory? I'm happy if they succeed because I like the idea of written content succeeding. But I think what they're looking for is a buyer. So who is going to buy them? I got a couple of ideas. One, I could see an argument for ESPN buying them and rolling the entire Athletic business model into ESPN Insider / ESPN Plus. If ESPN is trying to find a reason to get more ESPN Plus subscribers, given the fact that it exists online, if they can get to roughly break even, and they have people who are paying around $60 some odd a year already, that's about what ESPN Plus costs. So if ESPN could bring in that audience, it would immediately juice their subscription numbers by a lot there as well, okay? That's one idea. Another idea. Why wouldn't a big gambling company just buy them and use their existing model and turn them into a funnel for gambling-related revenue? All right, think about it. For gambling-related revenue, whether it's DraftKings, whether it's the Stars Group, whether it is FanDuel, Bet365, this is my big question, all right? And I'm going to write an article about this because I think it makes a lot of sense. We're in an era now where sports gambling is going to take off, and everybody who is out there is going to be spending a ton of money to try to bring in subscribers. Why wouldn't you want to buy a company, Outkick is a good example too, that has a direct relationship with a substantial audience that regularly comes and consumes their product, and be the sole advertiser? In other words, You could buy The Athletic, and you could be giving them tons of great content. And as part of that content, you get, I don't know, automatically registered to be able to gamble on their website as well. I don't know why you wouldn't do that. I also don't know why you would, and people say, well, there's no advertising on it now. But yeah, but it's probably going to end up happening at some point. But if it's like a branded based advertising, it's not a big deal. I don't know why you wouldn't do that. I don't know why you wouldn't try and buy Outkick. I don't know why you wouldn't try and buy Barstool. I don't know why you wouldn't try and buy The Athletic. Anybody that has produced a substantial audience. It's basically beachfront property in a gambling age. And there isn't that much beachfront property. I'm going to the beach next week. Do you know how much money is spent on beachfront property as opposed to the next step back from the beach? I think it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. Now, Fox Bet is getting involved in such a big way. I've got an endorsement deal with Fox Bet already signed. We're going to be doing a lot of things starting when they launch. Fox is going all in on sports gambling. But I still own 100% of Outkick. And I'm going to be doing things in the state of Tennessee. Looks like Tennessee's going to have legalized gambling. I want equity. I want equity in a lot of this stuff. I don't want to just make money. I want to make generational money. And I think that's where we're headed in sports gambling. And so if those companies were smart, instead of spending all their money on advertising, I don't know why you wouldn't go grab the best and biggest audiences and make them a part of your website. Just makes a ton of sense. The difference between beachfront and back a road on beachfront is like sometimes 70-80% of overall value. People want to be able to walk out onto the sand. In this scenario, the ocean is all of the sports gambling customers. You need to be beachfront. And I think a lot of these companies are spending money in a not very smart way. Somebody said, Portnoy will never sell. Never. He's already sold almost all of his company. Portnoy probably doesn't even have 10% left of Barstool. Ask him. The money that they have raised, he has a tiny, I bet, percentage of the overall company. So he's already sold almost all of his equity. Oh, yeah. He almost has sold all of his equity. Those guys have a tiny percentage based on the money that they have raised of their overall brand. Not to take shots at them, but they sold their equity for substantial amounts of money. I've never sold any equity in Outkick because I've never tried to raise a ton of money to go out and hire a bunch of people. Because I've never wanted to have to deal with somebody else telling me how to make decisions or anything else. And so it's curious. Same thing with The Athletic. Once you raise $90 million, once you raise $100 million, your exit strategy probably, unless you are going to become a billion-dollar company, unless you are going to do that, then you're going to sell. Your goal is to sell to a bigger company. That's 100% the reality. And the pressure becomes substantial, and all of the initial founders don't have that much of an equity stake. We're going to have a really good, if you're intrigued by this conversation at all, I've got Dave Finocchio on, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. And the question is, do you want 100% of a decent-sized business? We're a multi-million-dollar business that I own 100% of. Or do you want a tiny percentage of a bigger business? It's an interesting question, but it changes the dynamics of what you're trying to do. Anyway, once you raise $100 million, you're basically trying to find somebody else who's going to buy your company for $200 or $300 million so the equity investors can get their money out of your company. Or you're going to try to go to like $1 billion or $2 billion. And if that's what you're trying to get to, then maybe your play is to eventually pay them back through the earnings that your company produces. But still, the only way to get that equity untapped from the venture capital universe is typically a big sell. All right, this is a fascinating story. This is a fascinating story in general. Cord cutting. And it's not, look, I always say that a lot of people in my industry who cover media are not very smart, and they don't do a good job looking around the corner at the direction that we're moving. They cover what's already happening right in front of their faces or what executives hand to them. Cord cutting in the second quarter of 2019 has turned into one of the biggest stories in the history of sports media and the history of media in general. So far this quarter, from the companies that have announced, we have seen 1.3 million people abandon cable and satellite subscriptions. I occasionally like to ask questions. Do you have a cable or satellite subscription? Do you have right now a cable or satellite subscription? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, how many of you are using your parents' or someone else's login to digitally stream your show? People didn't want to acknowledge what I've been saying for years, which is cord cutting is a is a train rushing down the track, and it's wiping out so much of what was built. So think about this, a little bit of a lesson here. Cable and satellite subscriptions reached 100 million-ish subscribers in 2011. That, now that you look at it, was the peak of the cable and satellite industry. Okay? 2011. We now are down to around 83 or 84-ish million subscribers to cable and satellite. How far is that going to fall, and how quickly is the destruction of that business going to accelerate? Because it ties in directly with what I think is a big battle that is being fought right now. Dish Network. I don't know how many of you guys have Dish Network. If you have Dish Network, let me know. Has just blocked all 22 regional sports networks. The regional sports networks are like Fox Sports South, Fox Sports Ohio, Fox Sports Arizona. Those are no longer sports owned by Fox. Rupert Murdoch sold those to Disney as part of the purchase of those Disney Fox assets. Disney had to sell them. Sinclair is now buying them. They have pulled it off of Sling TV. They have pulled it off Dish Network. And significantly, they have said it's time for sports consumers to start paying for their own content. This is a shot across the bow at the entire sports media, sports television industry. Because people say, oh, I wish we had a la carte. If you are a big sports fan, you don't want a la carte. You don't want it at all, because a la carte ESPN, if you had to pay for it by itself like it was a Netflix, it would cost $30 a month at least. $30 a month times 12, that's $360 a year you would pay for just ESPN. The reason why ESPN only costs right now $7 a month is because that channel is subsidized by tons of people who never watch it. And what's intriguing is, in the streaming era, you only pay for what you watch. And so I don't know about you guys. I got Hulu, I got WWE, I got DAZN, I got Netflix, I got Amazon Prime. I'm probably going to end up in my house with Disney Plus. All of these streaming devices are now coming out here, and it's hard to find the shows that you want to watch. Do you know what I'm talking about here? Like, we watched in my house Top Gun on Saturday night. Wild night here in the Travis household. And before we bought Top Gun, I got on Netflix and I jumped around on all the different devices to see where Top Gun was going to be available. And for instance, Netflix is losing The Office and Friends, which are its two most streamed stories. And as a result, it's going to get complicated to find out where in the world the show that you want to watch is, right? Because you're going to be like, in the same way, you're going to have to get out your remote, and all these streaming services are basically going to recreate cable, except you're going to have to be paying a lot more for them. And somebody's going to have the brilliant idea. Do you know what makes sense? We're going to bundle all this together. And that's why my prediction is Hulu, Disney Plus, and ESPN Plus are all going to cost $13, $1 cheaper from the Netflix, and Disney's going to try to create its own new bundle. But in the meantime, the cable and satellite universe is collapsing. And if the cable and satellite universe collapses, do you know what the impact is going to be? These local teams are going to have to go directly to try to get their viewership by selling streaming packages directly to their fans. And you know what's going to happen? They're going to have to cost a ton of money to replicate the money that's created now, because right now all of us sports fans are getting a free ride. And I mean free ride because we're all getting sports subsidized by non-sports viewers. And all these athletes and all these teams and all these owners have been raking in billions of dollars a year, billions with a B, off of people who never consume their product. I believe that unless Amazon or unless Netflix or unless Apple or Facebook or Google, YouTube, one of these big companies decides to come in and start wildly overpaying, there is no way to replicate the money that the bundle brings in from cable and satellite subscriptions by going direct to consumer, because the markets simply aren't big enough. And somebody just said, my grandma doesn't care about sports, but she pays for cable. She pays $8 a month for ESPN. So this is a huge story. I've been writing and talking about it for years. Most in sports media still don't even understand it, because the reason why they write about sports is because they didn't go to school for business, and because they're thinking about what's right in front of them as opposed to what's coming down the pike. This cord-cutting acceleration trend is huge. Somebody just asked a great question. Illegal streaming also factors in here in a big way. You can watch every game on Reddit. I didn't even realize this because I'm getting old. I'm 40 years old now. My kids know this. When we were overseas in London to watch the Titans and the Chargers play, I wanted to watch the NFL games that day. And I was watching the scores come in, but I couldn't because they only had one game on in England in our hotel. And so I was complaining about that, and my 11-year-old said, Dad, just get on Reddit and go into the Reddit forums, and you can stream any game for free that you want through our iPad. I said, what are you talking about? He said, watch. My kid takes our iPad, he types in, whatever it was, I don't remember the game. Let's say it was Patriots-Chiefs, right? Patriots-Chiefs Reddit stream. Immediately it pops up. I go in, I can watch every NFL game from London for the price of a Wi-Fi connection. Same thing happens with the NBA. Same thing happens with college football. You can watch every single game illegally streamed on Reddit. How are you going to stop that? How are you going to stop that prevalence? And if it's going on like that, how in the world does the NFL get people to pay for NFL Sunday Ticket? It's a fascinating question. I don't know the answer, but that is a huge deal. And if it's not Reddit hosting it, by the way, it'll be somebody else, because everybody off the grid from other countries, other places will make the same decision. And so my kids are smarter than I am about being able to find games, and they don't even care about them yet because they're not gambling on them. This is a huge deal, and I think it's only going to grow. And the end result is going to be we pay for what we really like. The downside is sports fans have been getting a free ride for a long time. And I think we're about to have to pay full freight, and full freight is going to be difficult for a lot of us to afford. How many of you would pay $300 a year for ESPN by itself? Because that's what you might have to pay. I think the universe that we're moving towards is going to be a fascinating one. I don't know what the end result is going to be, but be smart. Think ahead. follow strategically where the action is all going. I love all of you. My name is Clay Travis. This has been Outkick the Show. DBAP unless you need to SBAP. Bobby Bones is my guest this week on the Wins and Losses podcast. Last week was Kirk Herbstreit. If you're not listening to my Wins and Losses podcast, and I say this again in the most humble way possible, you know how I hate to brag. The conversations are pretty phenomenal. Guests have been great. You can learn a lot. I'm going down to the beach next week. Long drive. I know the feeling. You need something good to listen to. You're sitting on the beach and you're looking out over the water and you need something to do there. It makes a lot of sense. I'm telling you guys, check them out. The Wins and Losses podcast. Bobby Bones is the guest this week. Next week will be Bleacher Report's Dave Finocchio. I encourage you guys to check them out. They're pretty outstanding. You'll learn a lot. My name is Clay Travis. This has been Outkick the Show. DBAP unless you need to SBAP. Kisses. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Love you. Thank you, Facebook. See y'all.